begins. This week on the show.
Hey, this is Doug Meisinger, president of Vinyl Draft Radio, and we are excited to introduce a new show to you today, the Landlord Survival Show.
This is the Landlord Survival Show. When people stop being nice and shit gets real. You're the landlord. We're here to help. This is a show for what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. We're here for you because we're stronger together.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management. Built for investors, by investors. For more information about this show, please visit our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, home of the ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook.
Now, the Landlord Survival Show with your host, Steve Rozenberg.
All right, guys, what's going on? I dig that intro.
You like
I gotta say, I dig that intro.
There we go.
I am not Steve. I am actually Doug Meisinger with Vinyl Draft Radio, and I have the pleasure of sitting in on this first episode of the Landlord Survival Show, formerly Wealth Through Real Estate with Empire Industries, which I'm going to tell you I thought was a bit wordy.
It was a bit wordy.
I liked it, but it was a bit wordy.
Yeah. I like to use my words.
You like use your words, Steve. Use your words,
That's
Steve.
right.
Well, Steve, let's kick this thing. I think the listeners obviously know who you are, but I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself, your partner, and we're kind of talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing here today.
Sure. So my name is Steve Rozenberg, and we formerly had a prior show on here. We are Pete and myself are the co-founders of Empire Industries, and we are a single-family property management company. But first and foremost, Pete and I are investors. We own properties, we buy properties, we buy good properties, we buy shitty properties, we buy all kinds, and we've done it throughout the course of...
Pete's got a big smile.
Oh, yeah. We've got, we have more stories than we care to have, but we have them.
And we're going to get to them.
We're going to get to them.
We have at least 52 minutes worth of stories.
Yeah. And so the reason I created this show is that, everybody always talks about the great things, the Facebook life of everything that's not real. And nobody ever talks about the down and dirty of buying properties for the average investor that maybe owns one or two properties that's just trying to figure things out.
Right.
And I just think it's important that somebody help these single investors, educate them and let them know that, look, there are ways to come up with successful solutions. There's people just like Pete and I that have done it wrong, learned how to do it right, created a very successful company out of that, and continue the path that we're doing and try to give back, basically, is what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And you guys, you talk about growing. How many locations are you up to now?
Well, we are in 3 cities currently. We are in Houston, we are in Dallas, we are in Fort Worth with multiple offices in each one of those locations.
Right.
We just announced that we are moving into Austin, so we'll be operating out of Austin as well.
Okay.
And more cities to come. And that is on the property management side, which is kind of the way I could put it is that's kind of the ugly sister of real estate. Because nobody really likes us. Nobody wants us around, but they need us around.
Yeah.
So we're like the trash men, right? Nobody wants us, but they need us.
The waste management.
Yeah, we're the waste management of real estate. And it's one of those things that everybody talks about the great things about owning and buying properties. Like Pete and I bought properties based on numbers and based on data. Mm-hmm. But when you buy those properties, those don't always materialize like the way the salesperson presented it at the time, let's just say. And then you sit there and scratch your head and go, that's odd. I wonder what I'm doing wrong. And no one is there. It's like crickets, right?
Yeah.
No one's there to tell you what you're doing wrong. And you kind of have to, it's like, walking in the pitch black dark. You kind of have to feel your way through and hope that you're getting it right and hope you don't fall into one of those pitfalls called a lawsuit or bankruptcy or foreclosure or, those things that are real.
So what you guys can do basically is use all your screw ups
basically
as sort of a roadmap for other people.
Yeah.
What not to do.
What not to do. I think it's and I think that I think it's important. And Pete and I, we think of ourselves as educators. We really like educating people because nobody was really there to educate us. And Pete and I did not come into this world thinking we were going to be investors. We didn't think we were going to be business owners. He and I had regular career jobs. We got into this because we thought we liked the concept of having the dream of owning real estate. And, you see these people up on these pedestals that own these properties, and you're going, well, this is, Corona money, right? I'm going to be sitting on the beach and just collecting this. If he can do it, I can do it, right? But nobody ever tells you what they had to do to get to there or even if that's a reality. And so we try to kind of talk about our reality of what
Right.
happened to us.
Cool. Well, that's a pretty good jumping off point to get into how you guys got into this to begin with. Pete, I'm going to start with you. I kind of know your story.
Yeah.
It's a good one, and we'll revisit it. But we'll start
Okay.
with Pete. How did you get into real estate to begin with?
Yeah, so for you, all of your listeners that don't know, I am Steve Rozenberg's business partner, not partner.
Not there's anything wrong with that.
People's personal preferences, nobody but their own. And Steve and I met back in, I think it was like 2002. I got into real estate investing in 2001. I was working for a company. I was an IT professional for many years. And when I look back in 2001, I was at my 5th company, and the 4 previous companies did not exist anymore.
Wow.
And I had just been fortunate enough that I had moved to different companies before they closed down.
Okay.
But I was sitting there and I'm saying to myself, there's got to be a better way. I can't have my future in somebody else's hands, especially when you're seeing these companies that you work for, they either merged or they closed down or somebody bought them and your job is no longer available. And so I didn't think I was smart enough to create my own business at the time. So real estate became my business. And 2001, we really didn't have a lot of Google back then.
How do you say it?
The Google.
The Google.
Google. And but today, if you do a search on real estate investing, I mean, there's so many gurus out there that basically what Steve was saying teach you how to buy the property, but start looking to see who helps you manage the property. And there's no gurus out there on how to manage the property. So, but anyway, back in 2002, that's when I decided I need to secure my future, and so I thought that it would be through real estate investing.
Okay.
And of course, I was a buy and hold guy. When I met Steve, Steve was a wholesaler. We called it optioning back then.
Yeah.
It was no such
It's a big
thing.
word. It's a big word.
I'm getting out the Google.
Yes,
Yeah.
the
See what I
Google.
mean?
They're
You need a
the
thesaurus
Google.
for
yes,
that.
Thesaurus.
And so I was buying and holding. I was buying duplexes in low-income areas, and we can talk about why that's not a good investment.
Okay.
It's another show.
And so Steve and I, we met through a mutual buddy, and basically he was going to buy I think was it like a 12-unit apartment?
I think it was
complex?
16, but I don't know if all of them were actually being used as rooms. But it was a 16-unit building in Kashmir Gardens. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Huh.
Yeah, it's not really a garden per se, but it is a very interesting part of Houston.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that.
It's in the 5th Ward
All right.
in Houston, and there's a show on A&E called Drugs Inc. And down the block from where I own my building and Steve actually was going to buy his building, they shot an episode.
Yeah, so it was kind of famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was well known.
So it's a very nice area.
Yeah.
Sounds it.
Kashmir Gardens is a nice area of the 5th
It really
Ward, by the way.
does.
Well,
Yeah.
it sounds nice, right?
Yeah. It sounds
Yeah.
like a cemetery, actually.
Well, it's
So before I met
Pre-cemetery.
Steve,
it's kind of yeah.
So before I met Steve, I had owned a bunch of duplexes, and then I bought this 52-unit apartment complex made up of 26 duplexes, and I also owned a 100-unit apartment complex in South Houston, which before we got on the air, I told you a little bit about that story, which is
Yeah.
I got train wreck stories like you wouldn't believe, and I'm still standing. That's the main
Yeah,
thing.
He's
there
still
you go.
standing.
There you go. I'm all
the
about a
main
good
thing.
train wreck story, though. I got to tell you.
And when we meet people for the first time, I always tell Steve, let me tell my story first. Because it's not, I mean, being an IT guy, like, no, that's not really, no pizzazz there, right? And then he tells everybody he's a, pilot.
Right.
So I started telling people that I was a private investigator.
Nice.
It kind of helps get the mood and the tempo going a little bit better when because I would tell my story about being an airline pilot and my story would happen this and they go, what do you do? And he goes, I do IT, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh.
tell
Okay,
me
so
about
anyway,
this
Steve,
pilot thing.
Yeah. Go with stuntman.
stuntman.
You can
Oh, I
never-
like
you
that.
can never go wrong with
I like
that.
that. Yeah, like The Rock. You can be the double for The Rock.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that guy got a truck.
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
why
Yeah,
not?
exactly. I saw that. I just
Yeah.
saw that.
Nice work if you can get it.
Nice work if you can get it. Yeah.
All right, Steve, let's jump to you. I know your story, but I really love it, and if you wouldn't mind sharing it for those that don't.
Sure. Yeah. So, I never wanted to be in real estate, never wanted to be involved in any of this stuff, owning a business, speaking. My background was being an airline pilot. That's all I ever wanted to do as a little kid. Saw the planes in the sky, said I want to do that. Didn't know anyone in the industry, studied, went to school, very focused and specific into that industry. Got hired, second youngest person hired at the airline that I was working at, a major airline. And just a hard charging, go getting kind of kid. Got hired at 25 years old. with Continental Airlines at the time, since changed names. But that day in history that affected everyone, 9/11, affected me even more, because even though it affected so many people with their jobs, a lot of people have since moved on about that. But for me, it was a huge touching of the stove moment, in the sense that I realized that how close I came to my whole career, everything that I learned, studied, all that, basically almost dissolved in a matter of 72 hours. And I went from September 10th of having the best job in the world, best career in the world, that was the safest way to go, to 3 days later getting sent a furlough notice saying basically, thanks for playing, but we may be downsizing and you're not going to fit anymore in this industry. So you go from your whole life knowing one thing to all of a sudden 72 hours later, you've got all this drama, everything going on in the world, to being told that you're not going to have a job anymore. And you realize that safe, secure job that you thought you had was actually the most unsafe, unsecure job that existed. And when you're so focused in one industry and so specialized, it actually, you almost pigeonhole yourself. And what I realized is that I wasn't qualified to do anything else. I remember looking in the want ads. Do they even have want ads anymore?
Yeah, but it's called Monster.com.
Monster.com, right. So this was back when you actually did the paper. And I remember looking in the want ads.
See, I told you, Google wasn't around in 2001.
The Google. And I remember looking at jobs, and I remember seeing like a commercial truck driver, and I'm thinking, well, I could do that. I wasn't even qualified to drive a truck. And I'm thinking to myself, how screwed up is this? Like, I can fly a plane with several hundred people. I'm qualified to that, but I'm so specialized that I don't even have a license to drive a truck. And you realize that you're at the mercy of a company. I mean, you can do stuff, you can strike, you can do all those things, but at the end of the day, you really have no power. And I really realized that. And so because of that, I started thinking there's got to be something else I could do. I never wanted to give up flying, because that's more of a love, right? You do something like that because you love doing it. I love flying. I'll never give that up. But I realized that I needed to have something else, because if there was another catastrophe, I would be, no one knew what the industry was going to do. And this is, of course, of a couple months going by, and everyone's kind of, on semi-shaky, stable ground, And so I started looking at real estate, and I realized that it was like this whole other society that was going on, that existed without me ever even knowing or understanding, because I was so focused on being an airline pilot. I didn't know that there was anything else that you could do. So then I started learning about real estate, and what I learned, I started reading about a book a week. I mean, I was just emphatic about understanding, because it was like I needed to do it, because I felt like I was out of time, or I was running out of time. Like I had wasted the first 20 years of my life doing something else that now may not exist anymore. So you feel like, okay, I gotta get shit going. I gotta make this work, you know? And so I started learning about real estate, and what I realized is so many people at some point in their life that are wealthy were tied to real estate. Whether they owned it, whether it was family owned, whatever it was, at some point, whether they got wealthy and then bought real estate, but it was a great leveraging point. So I really liked that. So as I started getting into this, I was told about a guy who taught, I think I paid him maybe $10,000 to learn a course on, it was called, it wasn't called wholesaling. I forget what it was called. It was basically
optioning. I think
yeah, it was optioning contracts. And basically what you would do is I learned that you could basically, if you knew how to talk and know how to negotiate, you could basically go in and get a contract on a property, an option agreement, and then you can sell that option for a fee, an assignment fee, and you can basically make the difference between what you got it at and what you sold it at, and you would make the difference of that. I'm not sure if they still do that or that's still the case, but basically that's how I kind of got my foot in the door, because I didn't commit to actually buying a rental property, but I could get into the real estate business and generate some revenue. So what I did, I got pretty good at this, and I was able to negotiate and do pretty good, and I started doing it more and more, and I started making a good amount of money on these deals. And so I saved up my money to buy an apartment complex. I thought, okay, that's where I want to go with this. So I joined an investment group that talked about apartments and houses and stuff, and we kind of went down that path of me buying an apartment, but I only had X amount of money to buy something. And so that's why I ended up in the garden of Kashmir. And that's where I kind of what my money could buy. And I'll never forget, I'm talking to the people from this investment group, and they said, well, talk to Pete Neubig. He owns a 52 unit down the street. Maybe you could talk to him and he can give you some advice. I'm like, okay. So I give him a call, and he says, yeah, why don't you come down to my complex, and yeah, we'll talk. So I go down there, me, my wife, and my
2-year-old son.
No, I think he was more like
baby.
2 months or 6 month old kid. He comes
baby.
walking out of this complex, and he looks at me, he looks at my wife, he looks at my kid, and he goes, you don't want to be down here. I mean, it was really that quick of a conversation. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, trust me.
The rentals at the place was about $375 a month.
Wow. Okay.
So it gives you, even if you you take into consideration inflation, it's still pretty low.
Yeah. And so basically, after a conversation with Pete, he explained, listen, this is not what you want to get into. Don't this. I recommend you don't do this. I'm like, okay. So I pass on the deal. And I'm thinking, man, that sucks. But I'm thinking there's just some legitimacy to what this guy said. He knows he has a 52 unit down the road and had some other stuff going on. And so I end up getting a phone call from him maybe
a couple weeks later, maybe a month.
A couple weeks later, maybe he had this planned. I don't know still. I'm still trying to investigate that.
And they say he's the sales guy.
He gives me a call about a month later and says, hey, I'm buying this 40 or 39 unit complex over in Spring Branch. Do you want in on this? I'm looking for someone to go in on the deal. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in. I mean, I'm like ready to pull the trigger. I want to do something, right? I mean, I got money burning a hole in my pocket. Like a fat kid in a candy store.
Or a bunch of cocaine.
So I'm like a fat kid in a candy store. I want to buy something, right?
You should have invested in a radio station.
I should have invested in a radio station.
We'll talk after the show.
After this. A best salesman gets sold everything, by the way. So I go in partnership with him. And there was 2 other partners at the time, so there's 4 of us total. And Pete was the operating partner. Basically, he was going to run the deal. And
the lead partner.
Lead partner. And our deal that he and I agreed upon, I wanted to learn about apartment complexes. I really wanted to learn about owning because I'd never done that. And it was very interesting to me because I thought that's what I want to do. I don't want to keep doing this flipping because this is a lot of work, or wholesaling, whatever you call it. And it was just a lot of work because if I stopped working, the money stopped coming in. So it wasn't a business, it was a job.
Right.
But it was a means to an end because it was giving me a good amount of money to go ahead and buy real estate from. And our deal was he wanted to know what I was doing. It's like the grass is greener. I wanted to do what he was doing. He wanted to do what I was doing. So our deal was basically, hey, I'll teach you what I'm doing. Teach me what you're doing. And so that's kind of how we got into the partnership. And how long did we own that?
Well, the funny thing is we quickly learned that I didn't like doing what he was doing, and he didn't like doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
So I think that made for a good partnership when we actually built the management company. But we were in that deal for, I think it was 3 years. And then we sold it to we actually sold it to a church that was on the corner. So when we bought it, the church wanted to expand, and the Spring Branch ISD school system bought the property adjacent to the 2 of our properties, and they landlocked the church. Church had nowhere to go.
Okay.
So the church, after a year, the church said we want to buy it. So we actually sold it, but like for a future buy. So we were guaranteed we were going to make some money. It was going to be profitable, and we ran it profitably for about 3 years, and then sold it to the church.
Yeah.
So it was a much better deal. By the way, the 52 unit I owned for 10 years, and we ended up doing everything we could to make that place survive, and we ended up losing all of the investment on that deal.
Really?
After we sold it. Yeah. So, and I bought that. That was a 10 cap, or that was a 10 cap apartment complex, and the Spring Branch one was like I think it was like a 5 cap, meaning that your capitalization rate, the higher, the better return you get.
Right.
But
On paper.
And I think a lot of the gurus, what they sell you is they sell you the idea of you're buying, it's brick, mortar, wood, it's a spreadsheet, and you put this in. Here's the rents, here's your payment, here's your insurance, and here's your money at the end. And what they don't really teach you is that it's actually a people business. Real estate. It really is a people business. And so the X factor is the type of people that you're going to put into those properties. And so when Steve and I were buying these lower income properties, although you're buying them cheaper, and because the rent are supposed to be at a certain level and taxes are cheaper because the property value is cheaper, you're supposed to get this return. But in actuality, the renters don't pay as well as the as other properties. There's a lot more maintenance that's needed because the property's typically older. So there's all these factors that we accounted a little bit for. You always account for a little bit of eviction and a little bit of delinquency, and you always account for some maintenance.
Now, is there a formula for that? Do you go into it?
I'm sure there is, but we didn't know it.
You didn't know it.
I'm sure there is a formula. Don't ask us what that would be.
There is. The challenge is that there is no specific formula for any type of property. So no matter what formula you create, it really is you're pulling some information out of thin air, really. Now, the nice thing about with Empire is because we manage so many homes, we have a lot of numbers. So I can actually pull real numbers based on 800 properties. Right, so I know that our maintenance percentage, it's X percent. I don't have it offhand, but I know that. So when we do a spreadsheet now, and I want to do a 10-year out, I literally can say, okay, I know that the rents raise at about 2.5%. I know that maintenance costs me about 2%. I know that vacancy is X percent or delinquency is X. So I can actually pull that from our pool, and it gives me much better numbers in the future. And I know what appreciation rate is going to be. And so now I can actually pull better numbers for a 10-year out.
And one of the things too is when you're buying an apartment complex, you're buying a business. And you're basically buying a business that is defunct at some level. Most of the time, if you want to get a deal on it, it's like any other business. You're buying it because it's not being run properly. You feel that you can inject better policies, better procedures, better value to the clients, thus increasing the rent, which increases your NOI, which is going to make the business worth more money. Right. So, but those are, like Pete said, those are all assumptions that you're going to be able to do those things. You're assuming, you can't take a property that rents for $500 a unit and get $1,000. The market doesn't bear it in that area. No matter how nice you make the inside, the economy of that area is just not going to support it. And, the challenge is a lot of people that mathematically and on paper, it may make sense. Well, if you increase it to this, it goes across the board, your NOI goes up. But the reality, and that's where a lot of people get in trouble, where they buy these properties maybe from out of state or out of country, whatever it is, or even they buy them living here, but they don't know the industry. And logically, on paper, maybe it makes sense. But the reality, and that's what they sell you. They sell you on it makes sense, logically, you can do this, you can do that, and this should work. But the reality is we could look at that and say, you're never going to get that price point in this area because it just doesn't exist. And there's nothing you can do to change the whole area. And I think that's where they start stumbling in the apartment world.
Yeah. Also, I would say that we run into mainly two types of people when they're looking at a deal. The one type, we'll call him Steve. That person will look at it and they will see.
Ready, shoot, aim.
He will buy it on pro forma. Well,
and I'll sell him on pro forma
rents
too.
Could be this, and this could be
Sales
that,
guy.
And there's never going to be any maintenance. And why would anybody leave us? And so it's like, oh man, this thing's going to cash flow, like this. And
I'm not sure I said it that way, but sort of.
Right. And then we'll call the other guy we'll call him Pete, right? And this guy, fictional character,
the no monster.
Yeah.
But this guy, what he'll do is analysis paralysis, right? Mm-hmm. So he'll say, well, the rents will never get there. Matter of fact, the rents are going to decrease. And the maintenance is never going to be this. It's going to increase. And we're never going to have anybody living there. And so next thing you know, it's like, yep, no monster. The deal doesn't work. So obviously, it's got to be somewhere in between. And that's where if you have a mentor or somebody who's been doing this for a while, they can help you with that. And that's where your Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all these guys come into play, and they help you buy the property. What Empire does is we help you maintain the asset through the life cycle, right? And so we always say it's easy to buy a property, and I like to say buying a property is akin to dating, right? You date somebody, it's all exciting, it's very exciting, right? And then you own it. Now you're married to the property, and as the marriage goes on,
tread lightly here,
on,
Pete. That's all I'm going to say.
I'm just going to say it's not as exciting as dating. It still could be exciting, but it's not as exciting as dating.
Gotcha.
And so people, but honestly, people get bored when the business runs without them, and it's running.
Sure.
It's running good.
They almost
right?
self-sabotage it.
They almost self-sabotage it, and people get bored when they buy a house and there's nothing there for them to do with it.
And running a business is not supposed to be the running in, signing deals. Right? It's a very boring, as you know, it's a very boring, monotonous process, which is really what you want. You don't want this crazy ship going other directions. Like the second half of our story, what happened to us once we sold that apartment complex, and Pete sold me on an idea. I'll let you tell that story.
So I didn't learn my lesson by buying the 52-unit apartment complex.
Or the 100.
Or the 100 unit. Well, the 100 unit, that's a whole other story. Not my fault.
Did you take a bath on that one?
I lost my life savings on that one. But here's the worst thing.
It was more of a pool, not really a bath. You
Here's
jumped
the
in the
worst thing.
pool.
I lost my mom's money on that deal. She invested that deal with me. So I can talk about that. You want me to talk about that one first?
Yeah, talk about that one.
So
We have to extend the show a little
I'm
bit.
telling you.
So I got this great opportunity to buy this 100-unit apartment complex in South Houston. I was a passive investor, meaning that I was just a money guy. So the lead investor, who is still actually a buddy of mine, just went to his daughter's wedding, so we're still friends. He had this deal, and he needed people to invest in it. So my deal with him was very similar to what Steve did with me. Is I'll give you the money, but I want to learn the business. So I lent him money, and then he's like, "Well, I need another investor." So I'm like, "Well, I'll get my mom to invest a little bit of money." So yes, if you're counting at home, I lost my mom's money in two different deals.
And she still talks to him.
But only by mail.
By mail. And no more deals.
Yeah, exactly.
No more deals. So we bought this Class D apartment complex. So that means it's kind of a lower income. It was between two other Class D apartments. So 3 apartments in a row, all Class D, meaning D paper, real low income. Basically, if you have a heartbeat, you might get in. You're going to probably get into the apartment complex. The challenge we had was we wanted our apartment complex to be a C. So the lead investor, his business model was to make the apartments real nicer. So he was putting in new appliances, new tile, He's doing exactly what Steve had just talked about earlier. No matter how nice you make it, it's still a D. The biggest challenge we had was our apartment complex was in the middle of these 2 other Ds. There was no fencing around it. So when we would deny these other people to go into our complex because we're trying to raise it from a D to a C, they'd go to the other complexes, and guess where they would meet? They would walk across our complex, and they would basically take things and steal things and
Borrow.
Borrow. And so the model should have been to put a damn fence around that thing and not make the inside nicer.
But that wasn't the problem. That
When the balcony fell and the gas line exploded, that became the straw that broke the camel's back. And
yada yada.
Basically, what happened was our manager was stealing. Everything that could go wrong. It's like the money pit. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. The manager was stealing. We didn't have enough money to pay the note. So the bank told us that they would renegotiate with us. Ended up not negotiating with us. Took the property and sold the property from under us for a profit. So I'll just throw regular numbers out here. We owed about $1.2 million on it. They sold it for like 1.5. So in theory, in most cases, with your mortgage deed and everything, if they sell it for more than what you owe on it, basically your note is clean. You're
clear.
You're clear. No. There was a box that was checked that my attorney didn't catch, and they can still come after me for the difference. So the numbers really were $1.5 million owed, 2.1 sold. So they made $600,000 on the property, and then they came after me and the other partners.
And your mom.
My mom did not personally sign for the note. Thank God.
She loaned it. Yeah. Awkward Thanksgiving.
Me, the lead partner, and another partner personally signed for the note. And I'll say, for me, luckily, we were able to settle. I sold some duplexes that I had to pay for the lawyer bills.
Wow.
And the other couple, what they did is they listened to some guru. They maxed out all their credit cards to get the money to buy the apartment complex, and they are no longer in real estate. They had to file Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And so it was, it was a bad deal all around, all because of the wrong business plan.
Yeah. But what fascinates me is you go through that and you still re-up. You do it again. That fascinates me.
I'll tell you this. So this is about the time that I met Pete. When he was going through this, and I'm sitting there,
buyer beware.
I'm listening to this story.
I'm like radioactive.
But I tell you what, and I've told this to Pete, and I say this all the time. You really see the character of someone when the shit hits the fan, and his character. He never blamed anybody. He took responsibility, even though he had nothing to do with the deal. He never said anything. He never, he was in it, and him and our buddy, our mutual friend that we know. Never complained, never blamed. And I tell you what, that to me shows the character of someone. He could have very easily went on a blaming tantrum because he really was not, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just a bystander and still believed in real estate, still stayed in the hole, bought the 39 unit with he and I, and then he convinces me to go down this path.
Hey, Steve, let's go buy these low-income properties in the South Park area in the northeast part of Houston, which is really tough areas, because look at this spreadsheet. Look at the cash-on-cash return.
The numbers make sense. We're fishing in a pond that have a lot of people, meaning tenants, and we'll always get these rented. So I'll paint this picture as I've never owned any rental properties, and I've been flipping, and we just come off of this windfall of money from this apartment that we sold to the church. So we're thinking we are smart MFers right now. We can't go wrong, right? We're walking on clouds. Like
I hadn't lost the second apartment complex yet. I just want a little caveat.
Point. So he's like, hey, I got an idea. He's like, there's all these houses out here. We can get great deals. Now, this is about 2007 when the economy's just starting to tank. We're able to go and we're thinking, okay, we can't really.
Well, remember, we found that we couldn't find any buyers for the houses anymore.
Because we were flipping properties and we couldn't find any end buyers. So we're thinking we can still get great deals. Why don't we just keep them? Right? We know how to negotiate. We know how to find the deals. Instead of giving the wealth to someone else, why don't we just keep them ourselves and we'll just create our own portfolio? He and I got along very well. We thought we had the same mindset on stuff. So we thought, okay, let's buy a couple properties and see how it goes. And Pete comes up with this great idea. It says, hey, there's these great deals. They make sense financially. The cash-on-cash return is 59%, low barrier to entry. We can get these houses for $40,000, $50,000. We should buy them. Now I say, why just one? Let's buy as many as we can if they make that much sense.
Fire meet gasoline.
Yeah. So in a matter of a year and a half.
So but the objective at that point was to buy cash flow properties. Yes. That was our strategy. So we felt if we can buy enough properties at cash flow, then he can fly less and I can retire from my job. So the whole objective at the time was buy these properties that cash flow. We weren't worried about appreciation and we really weren't worried about equity. We just wanted cash flow. And so when you look, the lower income properties, the Class D type properties, they provide the most cash flow. And of course, it takes less cash to get in, low barrier entry. Yeah.
So we buy about 20 of these in about a year, maybe a year and a half, right? And we're just like, we are just sucking them up. And we're thinking, man, these people are so stupid. We're getting these at such good deals. And I can't believe nobody else wants these things. So
are you about to find out why nobody else wants these things?
Well, all of a sudden, our phones start ringing, and there's these people on the other line called tenants. And they want things from us. And they want things fixed. And they can't pay their rent. And they can't do this, and they're demanding things from us. And I'm thinking, I don't remember this in the apartment industry.
On the spreadsheet, was it?
That wasn't on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And we're thinking, this is odd.
Also, the gurus don't tell you about this stuff.
They don't tell you about this stuff. So next thing you know, we got a problem here. We have a maintenance issue at this property. We have a tenant not paying rent. We have this, we have that. He and I are kind of starting to juggle multiple facets of things. Meanwhile, we're still looking to buy deals and looking at stuff.
And working full time. And I was a newlywed at the time.
And he was a newlywed. And so I'll never forget this. One day, it's like rent day, right? Third or the first of the month or whatever. So I tell him, I say, hey, I'm going to go pick up the rent. Drive around, like 20 properties. He's like, what? I said, yeah, I'm going to go pick up rent. I'm going to go get the money. He's like, why are you doing that? I said, well, to get the money. Like, what do you mean? He's like, you think they don't know when rent's due? I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, they've been doing this their whole life. You think they don't know that rent is due at the first of the month? He's like, either they're teaching you or you're teaching them. He goes, and if you go driving around picking up the rent, they're going to be teaching you. And I'm like, no, it's just good to get the money so we can pay the bills and everything. He's like, you can do it all day long. I'm not going with you. I'm like, whatever. So I go and, let's say out of 20 properties, about 15 of them have the money, and the other one, I'll have the money on Friday.
My butt.
That's, I was about to say, that's higher than I thought.
More like 3. But anyways.
Okay. I was thinking 15. That's not too bad.
No, it wasn't. I'm trying to make the story sound better. So we end up going and, one of the guys, hey, I don't have the money. I'll have it on Friday. Okay, you'll have it on Friday. Yeah, I'll have it on Friday. Okay, you sure? You promise? Because if not, there's late fees and I have to evict you, which I'm thinking, I don't even know what that means, but it sounded pretty tough.
Sounds good.
So I show up on Friday. There's a car in the driveway. I'm looking in the windows. Nobody's answering. I'm knocking on the door. I call the phone. Of course, the Cricket phone is disconnected. The guy just called me 5 minutes prior. I don't know how that happens. And, I'm thinking, God damn it. Like, the guy just called me. Like, he said he was at the house. So I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. Nothing shows. Like, after about an hour and a half, of course, I drove on the other side of town to get there. Now I'm driving home. I'm pissed off. He's like, how's that going for you? I'm like, shut up, man.
So you know the term honky comes from, right?
Yeah, I do. Tell him.
The term honky comes from back in the 50s and 60s when basically most of the homes were owned by white folk back then, and not black folk. They couldn't own back then. And the white guy would go to down where his house was, and he would honk his horn at the front of the street, and the renters would come out to pay him. They say, honky's at the door again. Honky's at the door. And that's
where the term came from.
That's where the term came from.
Yeah, that's where the term.
So he was a honky.
That was me. Honking the horn, ready to collect the money,
horn.
and it didn't work as well. So finally I realized that is why people don't go chasing rent. So finally I'm like, okay, I got that. So we've got a lot of problems going on. We see some bubbling coming up of some issues with these properties, right?
But here's the funny thing. Even the ones that were there to pay the rent, he had taught them that he's going to drive to them to
pick up
go
the rent.
collect up the rent.
Yeah.
So now even the good paying tenants are not paying their rent through the mail or on, through.
And if I'm flying a trip or I'm out of town, we're not getting our money because they're used to going, well, you're here every week, or every month,
Why are you charging me a late fee? You're the one who didn't show up.
Yeah, you didn't show up, So again, we started having some bubblings of some issues. So next thing you know, more problems, right? These problems are starting to come a little bit faster and furious where, we've got a fountain in the front yard of the plumbing because it's clay piping, and a root happens to go through the clay piping, and now we have a fountain. And I'm thinking to myself, this house is 50 years old. Like, this just happened today. Of course, then the tenants move in and they have more electronics than Pete and I put together, and they blow the 3 circuit breakers that are in the house. And now we send someone out there and they're like, you got to rewire the house and you need a new electrical box. I'm thinking, this house has been here for 50 years. Why do we have to do that now? Well, that's what you have to do, right? So we start seeing this trend of issues. So it gets worse and worse progressively, and you would think that we would start learning our lessons, but we don't. So we buy another 15 or 13 of these things. Now it's almost like we took a bonfire and just threw a huge can of gas on it, and it just exploded in our faces, where we thought, well, we're halfway through the hill. Let's buy more, use economies of scale, and this thing will get better. It just made this exponentially worse. And next thing you know, we have 35 or whatever it is of these shitty properties, to the point where my wife said, if you buy another one, it better be nice because you're going to be living in it. Stop. Like, you suck at buying houses. Stop. You guys are no good at this. She was doing the bookkeeping at the time. So she's looking at the numbers going, this does not mathematically make sense. And I'm like, yeah, but on paper it's going to work and we're going to get the rents up. And I'm the salesperson. She's like, you're a moron. Like, this doesn't work. Like, this is not, I'm looking at the data. It is not working.
Yeah.
So the culmination, the tipping point, if you will, was one day Pete and I have a property over on the east side of town, and we decide that we are going to, we're short on cash. We got some serious financial issues going on. Properties are vacant. Every time, the make readies are 3 times the amount because they're trashing the insides of the houses. They're like, in 8 months, like they've been living there for 10 years. Toilets, they break the actual porcelain of the toilet. I'm like, how does that even happen? Like, I don't even know. Like, a wrestling match went on in there or something. So
yeah, our taxes and our insurance weren't in the notes, so they were due at the end of the year.
Okay.
And at the end of the year, we we thought, oh yeah, we got all this money. We didn't have enough money to pay the taxes and the insurance because we had so much maintenance, evictions, and so we were, we were supposed to accumulate all this funds. We were at one point we were 20 grand in a hole.
Yeah. On paper, they make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that didn't transfer into our paper, meaning our HIP national of our bank accounts.
Yeah.
And so we have this one event, the turning point, I'll tell you, that changed our lives is
11823 Green Glen.
Yes,
Holy cow, he remembers the address.
So we decide that we don't have a lot of money for the make ready, so we are going to do the trash out ourselves to save some money. And so we can just give it to the maintenance guy so that he can do it. And we'll save a little bit of cash. So we literally go to this property. He takes the day off work. I land from a trip flying and show up at the property in my pilot uniform, right? And so
I'm in a suit.
He's in a suit. So we basically, in the middle of the street, stripped down and changed clothes, right? And
we couldn't do it in the house.
Couldn't do it in
the house was roast.
Well, we didn't know that yet.
We didn't know
that yet. So we've got the neighbors who don't seem to work, and they're all kind of sitting in the yard drinking beers and stuff like that.
They must have taken a day off.
They must have taken the day off too to watch this episode that I'm going to tell you about.
They
in a minute.
had just landed from flying.
They may have just landed from flying airplanes too. That's very
Yeah.
possible. So they kind of know us because we're the two guys that drive around picking up the money. So we walk into this house. So we change into our street clothes. We walk into this house. It's about a 2-bedroom house, maybe 1,000 square feet. If there was any less than 1,000 cockroaches in this house, I would be lying. Now, it almost seemed like aliens came and just snatched this lady out of the house with all of her shit still in the property untouched.
Everything.
I'm talking photo albums. I'm talking wedding dresses. I'm talking food in the fridge. I mean,
by the way, electric was off for a couple of weeks.
yes. And I'll tell you about the refrigerator.
But it just smelled great.
Yeah. So Pete and I are looking at this house like, is she gone?
Furniture, everything's in there. I mean, couches, beds,
Yeah.
dressers.
Like I was thinking we're going to find her like in the bathroom or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, we thought, yeah.
Yeah. So we commence to going, okay, well, let's just start pulling this shit out. So we start pulling this out, and cockroaches are climbing on us, and it's just we're pulling it out into the street, into the grass area, and then the neighbors are like, it's like swap meet day, right? So they're coming and they're like shopping for clothes, right? They're like looking at stuff, and we're like, take it all, take it. And someone actually took the family photo album. I don't understand why they would do that, but they took her family photo album.
Because she was probably living in the down the block, and she asked them to go get it.
Get that one. So we spend hours just trashing this house. We're sweaty. We're smelly. I think he threw up a couple times when we had to take the refrigerator. I think some actually fell on you.
Some maggots or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was bad, right? So we're done with this after several hours, right?
Now there's a guy that drives by and he's got a trailer, and so he's like, "Hey, I'll take some of that stuff to the dump for you." So we was like, "Awesome." So we're giving him some stuff. He takes, I think, 2 or 3 trail loads, which we have to, of course, pay for. Yeah. Of course, Steve's negotiating the deal down, right?
I got a discount.
Right? Get a discount. So we're there, I don't know, probably a good 6 hours.
Yeah.
I would say. It's nighttime now. We get some of the neighborhood kids to go get us beer.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah, that we did, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we're standing there, and I'm thinking, well, I'm actually feeling pretty good. Like, hey, we did pretty good. So I could tell he's upset because he's not saying anything, and he's got that New Yorker upset look on him. Uh-huh. So I said, hey, man, how much money do you think we saved today? I go, thinking we saved some money.
Man, you're a cups half full kind of guy.
I am. I'm thinking we did pretty
are.
good. So I'll never forget. He turns around and he's got like shit still on him, and some throw up on his shirt and stuff still, I think. And he looks at me and he goes, "What do you do for a living?" And
He's
I'm like,
dumbfounded by the question.
I'm like,
he can't answer. It's like when a dog looks at you and they tilt their head. He's like,
he goes,
"I don't understand."
He goes, "What do you make an hour?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "How much do you make an hour being a pilot?" I tell him. He goes, "I know what I make an hour." He goes, "Do you know how much money we just wasted by us spending a day doing this?" He goes, "I am never, ever doing this again." And he goes, I remember he said, "We either figure out how to fix this problem or we are selling every one of these things and we are walking away from all these properties." Of course, it was hard to take him seriously with shit on his face still, but he did. So, and then he gets in his car and drives off, and I'm standing there, just... I think you may have driven off in your underwear. I don't know. Did you get in your? I don't know if you got in your car.
No, I actually got in my car, and I think I had roaches in the car for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it was a bad deal. So anyway, that was our turning point of, and I know we're getting close to running out of time, but basically that was our turning point of running
landlord versus investor.
Landlord
mindset.
versus investor. And we really started looking at how do we do this. And that turned into us creating the management company. But we're still investors at heart. And that goes back to the show. The reason we created the show, and we created, Pete just went through a whole thing creating our, he calls it the Ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook. And it's on our website, self-managemyproperty.com. You can get it there. But the whole reason we did this is we really want to help educate the average investor how to avoid what he and I went through. I won't even go into the Hurricane Ike story of losing 20 roofs and a house burning down and all. That could be another story. But
yeah.
I mean, we walk the walk. And I just think it's so important that people look at this as a business and not as a landlord hobby, and not going in with proper expectations. And that's kind of where Pete and I really want to educate people and get them on the right path to learn that this is a business. It's a double-edged sword, right? It can be a great or it can be horrible.
Yeah.
With either swipe. And we've seen the horrible side and we've seen the great side. We know a lot of people that we have helped make very wealthy by teaching them how to buy the right real estate. And we're contemplating creating some kind of mentoring program for the investor to help them learn what does it take. Because again, one of the things that bothers us so much is so many people teach you how to buy it, but they don't teach you how to actually get the return out of it month after month. And that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, because just because it says on paper it's going to be a 30, 50, 70% cash on cash return, if that's not realized and it doesn't actually go into your bank account, what's the point in doing it? And, the one thing that I had learned, and Pete and I think we've conveyed this, is nobody puts a value on the mental stress that you go through and the sleepless nights of saying, how am I going to pay these mortgages? What am I going to do? Getting scared when your phone rings thinking, please don't be a tenant. Please don't be, and you're like a victim, and nobody puts a value on that. And when you've walked that walk like Pete and I have, and we tell people, look, you don't want to over leverage yourself. You don't want to buy a bad deal. Have a deal because it makes sense. And that's why the Ultimate Landlord Survival Handbook that Pete created, the education classes I'm going to be doing, our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, all these things, and this platform as well, especially this platform of the station, is to convey that message. And I think it's very, very important that people learn how to do this the right way, and maybe not the way that we learned it.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited that you're doing this. It's probably been about a month that you came in and said you kind of had an idea of maybe changing gears a little bit and coming up with something new. And I didn't really have a good grasp of what it was you had in mind, but I trusted you enough to know, whatever it is. And then as it started to flesh itself out a little bit, it was like, oh, I totally get what he's trying to do with this. And I think it's going to be a fantastic show. I could sit and listen to stories like this. And sorry, I feel like I'm just feasting on the scraps of your failures.
It's important people to hear them,
Yeah, it is. And I think that's kind of the cool thing is you're in a position to say, hey, look, you may not realize where this could go south. I do. Yeah. And it's a great chance for you to sort of, kind of get in the way and guide people. And I think it's what you're doing is you're filling something that nobody's really filled that void yet. It's like you're saying everybody's just teaching you how to buy. Right. But nobody's teaching you what to do after you acquire. And the reason Pete created the manual that he did is we're showing you how we do it for 800, 900 houses. Like we're showing, look, these are the things that you do. What does it take to vet a vendor? What does it take what questions can you and cannot you not ask on an application? When do you do the eviction? When you have one or two properties, you don't go through this every day the way we go through all these things and systematize them. And that's kind of what he created.
How do you do the lease renewal? How do you actually make some money on this thing other than rent?
Yeah. And that's the things that, again, if you have a 9-to-5 career job, this is not in your forefront. It's not in your focus. So it makes sense that you would buy this manual or talk to us or have us help you at least to help strategize. I tell people all the time, I don't need to manage your properties. I don't need to just to have us have a conversation is just us having a conversation as investors, because I don't think there's enough of that. And I think there needs to be more education and less, trying to figure out what I can get out of you. Yeah, I agree. Pete, does your mom have a piece of this in case it blows up? And
No, she
has an IOU. That's as good as cash, though.
It is. Well, guys, listen, I can't thank you enough for doing this, and thanks for letting me be a part of the first one. I really look forward to this show. It's always a pleasure sitting down and visiting with you. I loved every single one of these stories, and hopefully you've got time to stick around when we're done, because I'm going to bend your ear for a couple more. But, guys, so stick with us every week. The Landlord Survival Show, formerly Wealth Through Real Estate with Empire. Aren't you glad you have to say all that anymore?
I do. I always have to ask Tegan what it's called. So now I don't have to.
I was about to say, he never remembers the name.
I never remember the name.
Right,
I'm like, what is it called?
The show. Hey, what's the name of the show?
What's the name of the show?
Yeah.
This one I can remember.
This one
And we
you
have a
can remember.
Facebook group, too, that you can go and you can see all the stuff on there as well.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks for listening. And Steve will be back next week. And join us again, Landlord Survival Show. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
This has been the Landlord Survival Show. Join us next time for more of what the gurus don't tell you about owning rentals. And for even more, find us on Facebook.
Brought to you by Empire Industries Property Management. Built for investors, by investors. For more information about this show, visit our website, selfmanagemyproperty.com, home of the ultimate landlord survival handbook.